My husband said, I'm going to sleep in the other room. Every night he said, I am going to sleep in the living room, until the day I heard a laugh that shattered everything I thought I knew about my life. I still remember the first night he said it. I had gone to bed like usual, expecting the familiar warmth of his hand in mine, the gentle rise and fall of his breathing beside me. But instead, he whispered, almost apologetically, I'm going to sleep in the other room tonight. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe he had a headache, maybe he was tired of my snoring. I laughed quietly to myself, shook my head, and tried to drift off. But that night, the quiet in our bedroom felt heavier, almost alive. I remember staring at the ceiling, feeling the absence of him like a missing piece of the room, a shadow where he should have been. And then it continued. Every night. I'm going to sleep in the living room, he said, each time with the same quiet tone, the same hint of something I couldn't place in his eyes. At first, I asked, is everything okay? He'd just smile, a small, distant smile, and say, I'm fine, dear. Just can't sleep well here. But the nights became longer. The empty side of the bed grew colder. And the silence, oh, the silence became deafening. Hello, everyone. My name is Margaret, I'm 72 years old, and I live in a small, quiet town in Ohio. I've spent most of my life here, surrounded by the familiar streets, the neighbors who've seen me grow from a young woman to the elderly lady I am today, and a house that has witnessed decades of love, laughter, and, as you'll soon hear, secrets I never imagined I'd uncover. Before I continue, I want to thank you for joining me. I know your time is precious, and I promise this story is one you'll remember. If you enjoy it, please consider liking and subscribing, and don't hesitate to share your thoughts in the comments. I always love reading your stories too. Sometimes they remind me I'm not alone in my experiences, even at my age. Back to that night, the first night he moved to the living room. I sat up in bed, listening for the slightest sound. A creak of the floor, a shuffle of sheets, a cough, anything. But all I heard was the faint hum of the old refrigerator downstairs and the ticking of the wall clock. I told myself, Margaret, you're imagining things. He's probably just restless. I tried to sleep, but my mind kept wandering. Why? Why every night? What was he hiding from me? I thought about our life together, almost 50 years of marriage. We had built a home, raised 2 wonderful children, and shared countless memories. He wasn't a man who kept secrets, or at least, I thought he wasn't. And yet, here he was, slipping into another room each night as if he didn't want me to know. The next morning, I tried to act normal. I poured him coffee, made his favorite breakfast, and asked him casually, did you sleep well? He nodded, smiled that same distant smile, and said, yes, dear. Fine, really. I forced a smile back, but inside, unease had begun to settle in. Something was off. Something I couldn't name. Over the following weeks, I became hyper-aware of every little sound in the house. I listened for footsteps, doors opening, whispers. I found myself peeking around corners, checking the living room at night to see if he was really asleep on the couch or somewhere else. Each night, I'd convince myself I was being silly. He's my husband, I told myself. 50 years together. You know him. But the truth was, the fear, the doubt, was gnawing at me. I remember confiding in my best friend, Ellen. He keeps sleeping in the living room, I said one afternoon, my hands trembling over my teacup. Every single night. And I don't know why. Ellen reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Maybe he's trying to protect you, she suggested gently. Maybe there's something going on he doesn't want to worry you about. I nodded, but a cold shiver ran down my spine. Protect me? From what? As days turned into weeks, I noticed small, unsettling details. A door left slightly ajar that I was sure I had closed. A whisper of laughter I thought I imagined. A fleeting shadow in the hallway when the lights flickered. And always, every single night, him in the living room, staring at the television, quiet, too quiet. I want you to imagine how it feels to live like that. To share a lifetime with someone and suddenly feel like a stranger in your own home. Every familiar corner becomes a question mark, every laugh in a memory feels hollow, and every night, you lie awake wondering what you don't know, and what you're about to discover. That night, though, everything changed. I was woken by a sound I had never expected, a laugh. Not his. Not mine. Something lighter, stranger, almost cruel in its clarity. My heart froze. I sat up, straining my ears, my whole body shaking. I could hear the living room faintly, and then I heard it again, that laugh. Clear. Alive. Innocent sounding, but wrong. My stomach sank. I knew, in that moment, that my quiet, comfortable life, the life I thought I understood, was no longer what I believed it to be. Something was hidden. Something I had never suspected. And so, my story begins there. That laugh. That moment. The beginning of a journey that would test my trust, my love, and my very understanding of the man I married. I promise, if you stay with me, I'll take you through everything, the memories, the secrets, the heartbreak, and eventually, the truth. And though it's painful, and sometimes terrifying, it's also a story of survival, resilience, and the strength that comes from facing the unknown with courage. I've always believed that the people we become are shaped as much by the small moments as by the big ones. And when I look back at my life, I realize that many of the patterns, fears, and strengths I carry today were formed long before I ever met my husband. I was born in the spring of 1953, the youngest of 4 children. My parents were hardworking but kind, living in a modest little house on the edge of our small Ohio town. My father worked at the local mill, and my mother stayed at home, tending the garden, cooking meals, and sewing clothes for all of us. Life was simple, predictable, sometimes harsh, but full of love. I can still remember waking up on Saturday mornings to the smell of fresh bread baking in the oven and the sound of my mother humming while she stirred the batter. Those mornings were magical, even if the rest of the week was filled with work and school and chores. I was a shy child, always observing before participating, always listening before speaking. My older siblings, John, Mary, and Thomas, were boisterous, full of energy and opinions, and I often felt like the quiet observer in their whirlwind of life. But my parents always encouraged me to follow my own path, even if it wasn't as loud or flashy as my siblings. School was a mixture of joy and anxiety for me. I loved reading, especially the stories about faraway places, adventures, and mysteries waiting to be solved. I'd spend hours in the little town library, feeling as if the books themselves whispered secrets meant only for me. But I was also painfully aware of how easily things could go wrong. I remember one day in 5th grade, standing at the chalkboard, heart racing, forgetting the answer to the simplest question. The laughter of my classmates still echoes in my memory, a small sting that shaped the careful, observant person I would become. I met my husband, Robert, when I was 18. I was working at a local bakery, serving pastries and coffee to people who seemed to rush through life without noticing the little details I cherished. Robert was different. He noticed. He noticed the way the sun caught the dust motes in the bakery window, the way my hands trembled slightly when I was nervous, the faint scent of vanilla from the frosting I had just piped. I remember thinking, here is someone who sees me. We married 2 years later, after a whirlwind courtship filled with laughter, long walks along the river, and dreams whispered under the stars. At the time, I believed our love was unbreakable. And for many years, it was. We had 2 children, Sarah and Michael. I remember the day Michael was born like it was yesterday. The hospital room was bright, the air heavy with antiseptic, and yet my heart felt lighter than it ever had before. I held him close, feeling the tiny rise and fall of his chest, and whispered promises I fully intended to keep. I will protect you. I will love you. I will always be here. Life in those years was busy, sometimes chaotic, but it felt secure. I remember evenings in the kitchen, the smell of spaghetti sauce simmering on the stove, Robert humming while he washed the dishes, the children laughing at the table. Those moments were ordinary, yet they were everything. But life isn't always ordinary. Small cracks, invisible at first, began to form in our perfect picture. Robert had a temper, though it was subtle at first. A sharp word when tired, a sigh when stressed. I told myself I could manage it. This is just life, I thought. Every marriage has rough edges. I learned to navigate them, smoothing out the tension, keeping peace where I could. When Michael turned 10, he developed a chronic illness that kept him in and out of hospitals. Those years were some of the hardest I've ever faced. I learned what it meant to be vigilant, to notice every little change, every symptom, every sound in the night. Perhaps that's why, decades later, when Robert started sleeping in the other room, I noticed the subtle changes, the silence, the distant smiles, the little shadows that didn't belong. My instincts, honed during those hard years, didn't allow me to ignore it. I want to tell you, too, that our life wasn't all hardship. There were moments of joy so vivid that I can still feel them as if they were happening right now. I remember family vacations to the lakes nearby, the way the sun reflected on the water, the laughter echoing over the waves. I remember dancing with Robert in the kitchen after the children had gone to bed, pretending we were young and carefree again, even though exhaustion clung to our bones. But beneath the laughter and warmth, I also learned the importance of vigilance, of intuition. Life taught me that love isn't always blind, it requires careful observation, patience, and courage. And those lessons, though buried deep, would later prepare me for the nights that became so full of fear, confusion, and suspicion. Even as I recount these memories, I can feel the tension building toward the moment when I first heard that laugh, the one that would unravel everything I believed about my life and my marriage. I can see it now, in slow motion, the quiet house, the faint creak of the floorboards, the soft glow of the living room lamp, and the sound that pierced the night, leaving me frozen with disbelief. That night wasn't just the beginning of my discovery, it was the moment all those years of quiet observation, careful thinking, and deep love collided with reality. And it's what leads me to share this story with you, so you can feel the journey, the fear, the heartbreak, and, eventually, the triumph of understanding the truth. Life with Robert had been comfortable, predictable even, for so many decades that I didn't know how to react when the routine suddenly began to crumble. At first, it was subtle, a glance that lingered too long, a phone call he quickly ended when I entered the room, a sigh that seemed heavier than usual. I tried to dismiss it. I'm overthinking this, I told myself. But my intuition, sharpened over years of raising children, managing households, and navigating life's small crises, refused to let me ignore it. Every night, he'd announce, "I'm going to sleep in the living room," with that same distant, almost apologetic tone. And every night, I felt the cold void where his presence should have been. The bed felt like a stage set, empty and uninviting without him beside me. I tried to sleep, tried to focus on the soft ticking of the clock, the gentle hum of the heater, but the absence gnawed at me. I started noticing patterns. He would go to the living room shortly after I had gone to bed, yet the television wasn't always on. Sometimes he just sat there, motionless, staring at the dark corners of the room. At first, I thought perhaps he was reading or reflecting quietly. But then came the laughter, the faint, elusive sound I first mentioned, the one that froze my blood. I'd hear it just as I drifted to sleep, too far away to make sense, too distinct to ignore. I tried confronting him, carefully, with the gentlest tone I could muster. "Robert, is everything all right? You've been sleeping in the living room a lot lately." He looked at me, his eyes momentarily softening, then hardened again as if he had rehearsed the answer 1,000 times. "I'm fine, Margaret. Just can't sleep well here. Don't worry about it." I nodded, but inside, worry grew into something heavier, more insistent. My nights became restless. I began waking at odd hours, listening, straining to hear the faintest whisper of movement or laughter. I imagined all sorts of scenarios, innocent and terrifying, yet none could satisfy the growing tension that filled our home. Then came the small, subtle hints that something more was happening. A misplaced cup on the counter, a door left ajar, a jacket that wasn't where it should have been. Nothing that could be proven, nothing he could be blamed for, just shadows of uncertainty. And that laughter. It returned sporadically, haunting, teasing, leaving me questioning my sanity. I started confiding in my daughter, Sarah. She was now in her 40s, balancing a busy career with family life of her own. "Mom," she said one evening when I shared my concerns, "maybe he's going through something, stress, depression. Some people just need space." I wanted to believe her. I truly did. I wanted to believe that after 50 years of marriage, the man I loved wasn't hiding anything from me. And yet, there was a small, undeniable part of me, the same part that had protected Michael through his illness, that had quietly sensed danger in the smallest details, that refused to ignore the inconsistencies. One particularly cold winter night, I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I quietly got out of bed, wrapped a shawl around my shoulders, and crept down the hallway to the living room. The floorboards groaned under my weight, each creak magnified in the silence. The lamp cast long shadows across the furniture, and there he was, Robert, sitting on the couch, not watching television, not reading, just sitting. And then, faintly, I heard it again, the laugh. My heart stopped. I froze, unsure if I should call out or retreat. The sound came again, clearer this time, closer to the corner of the room where the shadows seemed unusually thick. I took a hesitant step forward, and that's when I noticed it, something I had never expected. A small, shadowy movement, a flicker of presence that wasn't Robert's. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and whispered, "Robert." His head turned slowly, a faint smile on his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. The laugh echoed once more, and then silence fell. It was almost worse than the sound itself, the anticipation, the not knowing, the fear that something in my home, something in my life, was no longer what it seemed. That night, I lay awake for hours, thinking about our entire marriage, about the trust we had built over decades, about the children, about the home that had always been our sanctuary. And yet, in that silence, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to admit. I was scared. Terribly scared. Scared that the man I loved could be hiding something from me, scared that my instincts were finally alerting me to a truth I wasn't ready to face. But fear, I've learned, can be both paralyzing and empowering. It can keep you from acting, or it can push you to seek answers. And I knew, deep down, that I couldn't ignore this any longer. Something was hidden in those quiet, ordinary nights. Something that would change everything I believed about my life, my marriage, and even myself. So, I made a decision. I would not wait for answers to come to me. I would uncover them myself. I would follow the traces, the small signs, the subtle shifts that Robert could not, or would not, explain. And that is where my story truly begins, the point where the ordinary life we built collides with a secret that had been quietly living in the shadows, waiting to be revealed. The days after that night felt different. Even in the bright sunlight, my house felt heavier, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for me to discover the truth. I went about my chores, made breakfast, tidied the rooms, but every creak, every shadow, every flicker of movement reminded me of that laugh, echoing in the living room, elusive and impossible to forget. I started taking note of the small details. The living room rug, once perfectly aligned, seemed slightly askew. A cushion that Robert always left neatly in place had been moved, ever so slightly, to the side. Little things, I told myself, but they piled up. My mind, trained by years of quiet observation and caring for Michael, refused to ignore these patterns. Something was off, and I knew it. I began leaving little signs for myself. A small pen mark on the corner of a photograph, a note tucked under the edge of a cushion. Anything to track the night's movements while I pretended to sleep. And every night, as soon as I heard Robert shuffle to the living room, I held my breath. Sometimes I would hear him muttering under his breath, other times just the silence, broken only by that soft, haunting laugh. It became a game of observation, though one I wished I didn't have to play. I felt like a stranger in my own home, walking silently through the familiar halls, listening for any sign of what I wasn't supposed to see. And yet, there was a strange clarity in the fear. It sharpened my senses, forced me to notice things I had once ignored. One particularly cold evening, I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I stayed up, pretending to sleep, my ears straining for the slightest sound. Around midnight, I heard the faint shuffle of slippers on the floor. Robert had moved again. I waited, heart pounding, until the laugh echoed once more. It wasn't coming from the living room this time, it was closer, almost beneath the stairs. I swallowed hard, feeling the familiar wave of dread mixed with determination. I crept out of bed, shawl around my shoulders, and moved toward the stairs. The house was silent, but the laugh repeated, soft and almost playful, yet carrying a weight I couldn't explain. I reached the foot of the stairs and paused, listening. There it was again, a laugh that didn't belong, a presence that didn't belong. I wanted to run, to retreat to the safety of my bed, to convince myself it was nothing. But something inside me, years of observing, protecting, and noticing the smallest details, told me to continue. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step careful and deliberate, my pulse echoing in my ears. At the top, I noticed the living room door slightly ajar. I peeked inside and froze. Robert was there, but not alone. A figure, small, shadowy, stood near the window, hidden partially by the curtains. The figure's head tilted back as the same eerie laugh escaped. My breath caught in my throat. I felt my heart hammering so loudly I was sure he could hear it. I stumbled back into the hallway, hiding behind the wall, watching, listening. My mind raced. Who is that? What is happening? My fingers gripped the shawl tighter as I tried to steady myself. I wanted to call out, to demand answers, but fear held me frozen. Then Robert turned suddenly, looking straight toward the stairs, and I realized he could see me if I moved. I stayed perfectly still, holding my breath as the figure disappeared behind him. Robert sat on the couch, sighing softly, and whispered something I couldn't quite catch. But the laughter had stopped. For a moment, the house was silent again, unbearably so. The next morning, I confronted him gently, trying to keep my voice calm. Robert, last night, I think I heard someone in the living room with you. He looked at me with those distant eyes, a faint shadow of a smile on his lips. Margaret, he said quietly, there's nothing to worry about. I told you, sometimes I just need space. I'm fine. Please, don't read too much into it. I nodded, pretending to accept his words. But inside, I knew the truth was waiting somewhere in the shadows, just out of reach. That day, I made a plan. I would not sleep again without knowing. I would observe, note, and uncover the secret that had infiltrated our quiet, ordinary life. I started keeping a journal, recording every night, when he moved to the living room, the time the laughter sounded, anything unusual. I noted the smallest details, the way a cushion shifted, the faint smell of something unfamiliar, the temperature in the room. My friends would have called it obsessive, but I knew it was vigilance, not paranoia. My instincts had never failed me, not with my children, not with our home, and not now. And then, one evening, I saw it. The first undeniable clue. A shadow moved across the room, too deliberate to be accidental. I held my breath, heart hammering, as I followed it slowly, carefully, silently. My hand brushed the edge of a small door, one I had never noticed before, tucked behind a bookshelf in the living room. I paused. My fingers hovered over the handle. This could be it. The truth waiting for me behind that door. For the first time in weeks, I felt a mix of fear and hope. Fear, because I didn't know what I would find. Hope, because maybe, just maybe, I would finally understand the nights, the laughter, the secrets. And as I stood there, trembling, I realized something important. The truth may be frightening, but hiding from it was no longer an option. That small, hidden door might hold the answer, not just to the laughter, not just to the nights Robert spent in the living room, but to the very heart of our marriage. I remember my hands trembling as I reached for the small door hidden behind the bookshelf. It was so unassuming, so perfectly concealed that I could understand how I'd never noticed it before. My heart pounded, a drumbeat of fear and anticipation that seemed deafening in the stillness of the living room. I took a deep breath and turned the handle. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. I hesitated for a moment, listening. Silence. No laughter. No footsteps. Only the soft hum of the heater upstairs and the faint, distant ticking of the wall clock. I swallowed hard and began to descend, each step deliberate, careful not to make a sound. At the bottom, the air was cooler, slightly damp. I could just make out the outlines of a small basement room. And then I saw it, a tiny, dimly lit space filled with toys. Not the kind of toys our children had grown up with decades ago, but new, modern, almost unfamiliar. A doll with glassy eyes, a small rocking horse, a stuffed bear, everything perfectly arranged. My hands flew to my mouth, and I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. And there, in the corner, I finally understood the source of the laughter. A little girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, sat quietly on a tiny chair, reading a story to herself and giggling softly at the funny parts. She looked up at me, startled, and then smiled shyly. "Margaret," she whispered. I froze. My mind raced. Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling. The girl looked at me with wide eyes and said simply, "I live here with him." "Robert?" I whispered, barely able to get the word out. My mind flashed back to every night he had said he was sleeping in the living room, the laughter I had heard, the strange movements, the small shadows that didn't belong. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. "Yes," the girl said softly. "He says I'm safe here. He says I need a quiet place. He says you don't understand." I blinked, confusion and shock colliding in a dizzying whirlwind. My husband, my Robert, was hiding a child in our basement. For how long? Why? How? The questions tumbled through my mind so fast I could barely think. At that moment, Robert appeared at the top of the staircase, his face pale, eyes wide. "Margaret," he said, his voice strained. I held up my hand, cutting him off. "How long?" I demanded, my voice trembling, both with fear and rising anger. Since last year," he admitted quietly. She needed a place to stay. I couldn't tell you. I didn't know how. I only wanted to help." I sank into a nearby chair, my hands shaking. My mind reeled. For a year, he had been sneaking down every night, spending time with this little girl, making sure she was safe, hiding her from me. I thought I knew everything about my own home, my own husband. And yet, there was this secret life I had no idea existed. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "We could have helped her together. We raised children, Robert. We've cared for children before. Why hide this?" He stepped down slowly, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I was afraid," he admitted. "Afraid you would be angry. Afraid it would break the routine of our life. Afraid I would fail her if I let anyone else know. I just wanted to protect her, Margaret. That's all." I looked at the little girl, her eyes wide and innocent, and I felt my anger and confusion melt into a complicated swirl of empathy and love. She wasn't a threat. She wasn't a problem. She was a child in need, and Robert had been carrying that weight alone for a year. I exhaled slowly, my heart still racing. "Why the basement?" I asked. Robert hesitated, then said softly, "It's quiet. Safe." I didn't want her to disturb you, to worry you, to feel like she was intruding. I thought, maybe I could manage it alone. I shook my head, tears welling in my eyes. "Oh, Robert, all this time, I thought you were distant, avoiding me. And all this time, you were trying to do the right thing." The little girl smiled shyly and said, "You don't have to be scared. He said I can stay. And I like reading to myself. It makes me happy." I reached out and took her hand, feeling the warmth and vulnerability of her small fingers in mine. "You're safe here," I whispered. "And I promise, we'll figure this out together." For the first time in months, the house felt lighter. The tension, the shadows, the confusion, they began to lift. I realized then that love isn't just about what's visible, what's comfortable, or what's expected. Love is also about sacrifice, about carrying burdens quietly, about protecting someone even when it means keeping a secret. And in that moment, I understood something crucial: the nights of fear and suspicion were not meaningless. They were preparation. They had sharpened my instincts, taught me patience, and prepared me to meet the truth, not with anger, but with understanding. Robert came closer, sitting beside me. "I'm sorry," he said again, voice heavy. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I just wanted to do right by her." I looked at him, my heart softening. "You did the right thing," I whispered, "even if it scared me half to death." And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a sense of peace, though tinged with lingering disbelief. The laughter I had feared, the shadows I had chased, were not signs of betrayal or malice, they were the quiet, innocent sounds of a child finding joy in a place where she felt safe. That night, I finally understood: the unknown can terrify us, even when intentions are pure. The fear we feel often masks truth, and only by confronting it can we find clarity, compassion, and love. The hours after that night were unlike any I had experienced in decades. I sat in the basement, the little girl curled up in my lap, while Robert hovered nearby, unsure whether to speak or simply wait. The air was thick with emotions: relief, confusion, lingering fear, and an almost overwhelming sense of awe at the secret life my husband had been leading beneath my very nose. I think the first emotion that hit me was shock. Not anger, not at him, at least not yet, but a profound, staggering shock. I had spent weeks, months, chasing shadows in my own home, imagining betrayals and mysteries, questioning everything about the life I thought I knew. And here it was, the truth, staring me in the face, simple yet extraordinary, so ordinary that it had gone unnoticed for a year. I looked at Robert, my husband of 50 years, and realized I had been seeing him in fragments. I had seen the tired man, the quiet man, the man sleeping in the living room, but I had never seen the part of him that carried a burden in silence, that sacrificed comfort for the safety of another. My anger began to melt, replaced by a deep, quiet admiration. "Why didn't you trust me?" I asked him softly, my voice still trembling. He met my gaze, tears welling in his eyes. "I did trust you," he said, voice breaking. I didn't know how to explain it. I wanted to protect her, and I thought, maybe I could manage it alone. I felt a pang of guilt for the doubt I had harbored. For all the nights I had stayed awake, listening, worrying, imagining the worst, I had never considered that his intentions could be so pure. I had allowed fear and suspicion to cloud my heart, even after all the years of love and trust we shared. The little girl shifted in my arms and looked up at me. "I didn't mean to scare you," she said quietly, her voice small and sincere. I like reading here." And he said I could stay. I hugged her tighter. "You're safe here, sweetheart. We'll make sure of that." Her presence, innocent and unassuming, had already begun to heal the cracks that fear had created in my home. Over the next few days, I began to see Robert in a new light. Each glance, each quiet gesture, was layered with intention. Every night he went to the living room, I understood why. It wasn't avoidance, it was care. The laughter I had feared for so long, the strange shadows, the unease, they were all signs of love disguised as mystery. Processing the truth was not instant. There were moments of lingering doubt, brief flashes of anger, and nights where I had to remind myself not to replay my assumptions. But slowly, patience and understanding began to replace fear. I began to help Robert. I sat with the little girl, reading stories, baking cookies, and making her feel welcome. I learned to ask questions gently, to communicate, to trust again. I also started reflecting on the past, the way fear and uncertainty can warp perception. All those nights I had imagined betrayal, I realized I had been chasing shadows of my own making, never stopping to consider the love and sacrifice that might be hidden in plain sight. Life, I realized, is full of mysteries, but not all of them are meant to harm us. Some are tests of patience, trust, and the depth of our hearts. One evening, I found myself sitting alone in the living room, watching Robert and the girl read together. The laughter that once terrified me now filled the house with warmth. I smiled, a quiet, unguarded smile, and thought about how easily fear had taken hold, how quickly I had doubted, and how resilient love could be when it was tested. I realized that the true challenge wasn't discovering the secret, it was how I responded to it. Anger, fear, and suspicion could have destroyed us. But empathy, patience, and understanding allowed us to grow closer, to support one another, and to extend care to someone who needed it most. That week, I made small changes around the house. The basement became a welcoming space for the little girl, with a small bed, blankets, and shelves for her books. I baked extra cookies and left little notes of encouragement for her. Each day, I found myself growing fond of her presence, and each night, I felt a new sense of peace when Robert returned from the basement. I also began to talk to myself in gentle, reflective ways. Margaret, I'd say, sometimes fear isn't a warning, it's a chance to practice trust, patience, and love. You've raised children, you've nurtured families, and now, you have the chance to extend that wisdom once more. Those words became a mantra, guiding me through the days and nights that followed. And through it all, I began to see Robert again, not just the man I married, but the man who carried burdens silently, who loved quietly, and who, even after 50 years, still found ways to protect and care for others. My admiration deepened, and my love, tempered by trials and understanding, grew even stronger. That period of adjustment, reflection, and quiet healing became a turning point in our lives. We learned how to communicate better, how to navigate secrets with transparency, and how to transform fear into empathy. The house, once filled with shadows and quiet dread, began to feel warm again. The laughter, once a source of fear, became a symbol of safety, joy, and resilience. I realized that life's mysteries aren't always threats. Sometimes, they are opportunities to practice courage, to expand empathy, and to strengthen bonds in ways we never imagined. And as I watched the little girl curl up with Robert, reading by the soft glow of the lamp, I understood that love, patience, and trust are the true anchors in any storm, anchors that had kept our family strong, even when secrets threatened to pull us apart. The days after the discovery became a turning point for all of us. I realized that life wasn't just about enduring the mysteries and surprises that came our way, it was about how we responded to them. And responding meant embracing the new reality, no matter how unexpected. I started with small gestures. Every morning, I made an extra pot of coffee for Robert before he headed to the basement, knowing he would be helping the little girl start her day. I left small notes by her breakfast plate, gentle messages of encouragement, "Good morning. Have a lovely day. You are safe and loved." Simple things, but they began to weave a new rhythm into our home, one where trust and care replaced fear and suspicion. The little girl, whose name was Emily, gradually became a part of our lives. At first, she was quiet, hesitant, observing everything with careful curiosity. But she responded to kindness. Slowly, her laughter filled the house in a way that no longer carried tension. It was warm, light, and unguarded. Watching her, I began to understand that integration wasn't about control or rules. It was about acceptance, love, and patience. Robert and I had many quiet talks, often late at night after Emily had gone to bed. I asked questions, listened to his fears and intentions, and shared my own thoughts and emotions. Those conversations strengthened our bond in ways I hadn't expected. 50 years of marriage had taught us patterns, routines, and habits, but now, we were learning anew. We were learning to communicate without assumptions, to trust without needing constant reassurance, and to love without limits. One evening, as we sat together in the living room, I noticed how his hands, once so tense with worry and secrecy, now rested relaxed beside him. "I can't tell you how relieved I am," I said softly, "that you trusted me enough to finally show me." Robert reached for my hand. "I should have told you sooner," he admitted. "I was so afraid of your reaction, afraid I might lose your trust, afraid I might fail her. But I see now that hiding things only made everything harder." I nodded, tears welling in my eyes. "We're stronger together, Robert. Always." And in that moment, I realized the full power of empathy, the ability to forgive, to understand, and to rebuild trust even after months of fear and uncertainty. Emily began to participate more in our daily routines. She helped me with cooking, assisted Robert with minor household chores, and sometimes even joined me in reading old photo albums, asking questions about our past. At first, the children were curious, then supportive. Sarah and Michael visited often, eager to meet the girl who had become such a quiet, important part of our lives. There were challenging moments, of course. Emily was adjusting too, learning the rules and rhythms of a new family, navigating the complex dynamics of adults who had decades of patterns ingrained in their behavior. She had fears of her own, fears of being abandoned, fears of not fitting in. But with patience, love, and gentle guidance, those fears began to dissolve. I learned something crucial during those weeks: emotional growth isn't linear. It comes in waves, sometimes crashing, sometimes gentle, but always persistent. Every small step toward understanding, every moment of shared laughter, every act of kindness became a building block for a stronger, more resilient family. I also reflected on myself. For years, I had been cautious, observant, sometimes skeptical. But this experience taught me the importance of balancing intuition with trust, vigilance with openness. I realized that I could notice patterns, sense danger, and still extend love and patience without suspicion clouding my heart. Robert, too, changed. The weight of secrecy lifted, he moved with ease, engaged more openly, and expressed affection without hesitation. We laughed together again in the kitchen, danced quietly in the living room, and shared stories late at night. The fear and tension that had once defined our nights faded, replaced with warmth, connection, and mutual respect. One afternoon, as I watched Emily play in the garden with our grandchildren, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. Life had thrown us a curveball, a secret that could have torn us apart. Yet here we were, stronger, more connected, and more compassionate. I understood that resilience doesn't come from avoiding difficulties, it comes from facing them, embracing them, and growing through them. I also realized that healing and growth extend beyond immediate relationships. By welcoming Emily into our lives, we had created a ripple effect of love and understanding. The children saw kindness, patience, and empathy in action. Robert and I rediscovered the joy of nurturing. And I, Margaret, learned that life surprises, no matter how frightening at first, can lead to profound growth when met with courage and openness. And so, slowly, our home transformed. The living room was no longer a space of secrecy, it became a place of shared joy. The basement was no longer a hidden corner but a warm, welcoming room filled with books, laughter, and light. Our nights, once haunted by shadows and doubt, became filled with conversation, storytelling, and the comforting presence of family, both old and new. Through this process, I realized that trust, once broken or challenged, can be rebuilt, not instantly, not easily, but with patience, transparency, and consistent care. We had learned to communicate with empathy, to forgive, and to embrace change as an opportunity for growth. And as I watched Robert tuck Emily into bed one evening, I knew that the fear and tension of the past months had given way to something far more meaningful, a renewed sense of connection, love, and family. Life had tested us, and we had passed. Not perfectly, but with honesty, courage, and hearts open to the unexpected. And that, I realized, is what makes love endure, even in the face of the unknown. It's remarkable, when you reach my age, how life has a way of teaching you the most profound lessons in the quietest, most unexpected ways. I often think back to that night, the night I first heard the laughter, the night I realized something was hidden in our home. For years, I had walked through life with my eyes open but my heart sometimes closed, careful to protect myself, careful not to feel too deeply. And yet, that one experience cracked open something inside me that I didn't know was ready to grow. After Emily became part of our family, I began to see the world through a slightly different lens. I understood that fear, suspicion, and uncertainty aren't inherently negative, they are signals, guides, tools that alert us to pay closer attention. But they are only as powerful as we allow them to be. If we let fear dominate, it can distort reality, isolate us, and prevent the growth that comes from facing challenges. I had almost let fear dominate those weeks, imagining betrayal where there was only care, doubt where there was only love. Through it all, I learned the value of patience. Patience with others, patience with life's mysteries, and, most importantly, patience with myself. There were moments when my mind raced, when anger surged, when tears fell unbidden. But I allowed those emotions to exist, to be felt, and then to pass. I learned that true emotional growth doesn't mean the absence of fear or doubt, it means acknowledging them, examining them, and choosing to act with compassion and understanding despite them. Robert and I, too, were transformed. 50 years of marriage had taught us resilience, but nothing had prepared us for this. This wasn't just about secrecy or a hidden presence in our home, it was a test of empathy, of trust, of the depth of our hearts. And in facing it together, we discovered layers of each other we had never truly seen. I saw the courage and quiet strength in him, the tenderness beneath his distant demeanor, the way he risked his own comfort to protect a child in need. He saw the resilience and empathy in me, my ability to adapt, to forgive, to extend care even when uncertainty threatened to overwhelm me. In reflection, I realized something about love that I wish I had understood earlier in life. Love is rarely tidy or predictable. It is messy, full of contradictions, and often tested in ways we cannot foresee. It requires courage, the courage to confront uncomfortable truths, the courage to forgive, the courage to trust again. And when we rise to meet these challenges, love deepens, trust strengthens, and the bonds that tie us together become unbreakable. Emily, the little girl who had entered our lives so unexpectedly, taught us lessons of her own. Her presence reminded us of innocence, resilience, and the quiet power of trust. Children, I've learned over the years, have a way of revealing the best and worst of us. They can expose our fears, challenge our patience, and yet inspire our greatest strengths. Emily's laughter, once feared, became a symbol of hope, joy, and renewal. Her quiet courage to trust a family that was new to her reminded me that we all carry the capacity to heal, to nurture, and to grow, no matter our age. I began sharing these reflections with friends, family, and neighbors. Sometimes in conversation, sometimes in letters. I realized that the story I lived through, the fear, the mystery, the revelation, the emotional growth, was not just my own. It was a lesson for anyone who has faced uncertainty, secrecy, or fear in their relationships. Life is full of hidden rooms, unexpected laughter, and mysterious paths. But if we meet them with courage, empathy, and patience, we can transform fear into understanding and uncertainty into connection. I also began to notice changes in myself. I was calmer, more reflective, more attuned to the subtleties of the world around me. I listened more carefully, observed more patiently, and approached challenges with a sense of quiet confidence I hadn't felt in years. There is a strange beauty in understanding that life's tests are rarely meant to punish us, they are meant to teach us, to refine our hearts, to expand our capacity for love. One evening, as Robert and I sat together on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. The shadows that had haunted our nights, the fear that had gripped my heart, the uncertainty that had filled our home, all of it had led to something profound, a deeper understanding of each other, a renewed family, and a sense of peace I hadn't thought possible. I told Robert quietly, I think we needed this. Not the fear or the secrets, of course, but the lesson. To see each other, truly, in all our strengths and vulnerabilities. To remember that trust isn't given, it's nurtured. And love isn't static, it's tested, shaped, and strengthened over time. He nodded, his hand finding mine. I agree, he said. And I'm grateful for you, for Emily, for everything we've learned together. I'm a better man because of it. I realized then that life's challenges, even the ones that terrify us, can be transformative. They force us to confront our fears, question our assumptions, and open our hearts in ways we never imagined. And when we allow ourselves to embrace the lessons, to extend patience and understanding, the results can be miraculous: a home filled with laughter, a family bound by trust, and hearts strengthened through empathy. That night, as Emily slept peacefully in her room, I sat quietly with Robert, holding his hand and feeling a deep sense of gratitude. Life had tested us, challenged us, and revealed truths we could not have anticipated. But through it all, we had grown, we had healed, and we had discovered the enduring power of love, trust, and courage. And in that quiet, reflective moment, I understood fully: life may be unpredictable, and mysteries may lie in the shadows, but with patience, empathy, and an open heart, even the most daunting challenges can lead to transformation, connection, and hope. By the time the weeks turned into months, our house had transformed in ways I could never have imagined. The living room, once a place of tension and uncertainty, now hummed with warmth, laughter, and the quiet rhythm of a family learning to embrace change. The basement, once hidden and secretive, had become Emily's little sanctuary, a place of comfort, learning, and joy. And Robert and I, well, we had discovered a depth to our bond that 50 years of marriage had only hinted at. I often reflected on those first nights, the fear, the suspicion, the endless questions that plagued me. At the time, I thought I was being cautious, even wise. But in truth, I had been on the edge of panic, convinced that the unknown must be something dangerous, something threatening. And yet, the unknown had turned out to be an invitation to grow, to trust, and to love more deeply than I ever thought possible. I shared the story cautiously at first, with close friends and family. Some gasped, others laughed in disbelief, but all of them listened intently. I realized that our experiences, our trials, carry lessons that extend beyond our own lives. By telling the story, I hope to inspire others to face the unexpected with courage, to extend trust before anger, and to embrace change with patience and empathy. Robert, too, had changed in subtle but powerful ways. He moved with a newfound openness, no longer weighed down by secrets or the fear of judgment. We began spending more time together, rediscovering shared hobbies, taking long walks, and talking late into the night about memories, dreams, and plans for the future. Our connection, tempered by trials and understanding, had grown stronger, richer, more resilient. Emily had become an inseparable part of our lives. The children adored her, and she, in turn, had grown confident and comfortable in a family that, though unexpected, had welcomed her completely. Watching her laugh, play, and read by the soft glow of the lamp reminded me of life's precious fragility and its unexpected joys. Her presence was a reminder that love and family are not always bound by conventional rules, they are defined by care, patience, and mutual respect. One evening, as we all sat together around the dinner table, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. I looked at Robert, who was telling Emily a story with the same gentle patience he had once reserved for our own children. I looked at the children, laughing and sharing their experiences of the day. I looked at Emily, wide-eyed and smiling, fully at ease. And I understood something essential: family is not just born of blood, but of shared experiences, trust, and love. I thought back to the nights of fear, the laughter that had haunted me, the shadows I had chased, the doubts that had filled my mind. Those nights had tested me, yes, but they had also prepared me for something greater. They had shown me that courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. That empathy is not weakness, but the key to understanding. And that love, when nurtured with patience and honesty, can transform even the most unsettling mysteries into sources of joy. As I shared these reflections with Robert that night, he reached for my hand and squeezed it gently. "You were incredible through all of this," he said softly. "Your patience, your understanding, your heart. I don't know what I would have done without you." I smiled, feeling warmth spread through my chest. "We did it together," I said. "All of us. That's the beauty of family, the unexpected, the difficult, the messy, it's all part of the story, and when we embrace it, we grow stronger." There were moments of quiet reflection that followed, late nights where I would sit by the window, watching the moonlight spill across the garden. I thought about my life, the choices I had made, the loves I had cherished, the mistakes I had learned from. I realized that every experience, every challenge, every secret revealed, was a part of the tapestry of life. And the beauty of it was not just in the resolution, but in the journey, the discovery, the growth, and the transformation. I also began to understand the enduring power of perspective. In the past, I might have judged, assumed, or doubted. But experience had taught me that patience, curiosity, and empathy often reveal truths far more profound than fear ever could. By facing the unknown, by trusting despite uncertainty, we unlock the potential for understanding, connection, and lasting joy. The laughter that had once haunted me now echoed through our home as a symbol of resilience and hope. The nights of silence, tension, and uncertainty were replaced by warmth, companionship, and shared stories. And as I watched Emily curl up with a book, her face glowing in the lamplight, I understood something essential: life's most powerful lessons often come through the most unexpected experiences, and the greatest growth comes from embracing them fully. That night, I whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude, for Robert, for our children, for Emily, and for the unexpected lessons that life had gifted me. I realized that fear and uncertainty are temporary, but love, trust, and empathy endure. And in the end, it is those enduring qualities that define a family, shape a life, and leave a legacy that transcends fear, mystery, and doubt. I leaned back in my chair, hands intertwined with Robert's, and let the quiet peace of the evening settle over me. I had faced fear, uncovered secrets, nurtured trust, and embraced transformation. And in that moment, I felt truly alive, fully connected, and profoundly grateful for the journey, every shadow, every laugh, every unexpected turn along the way. Life had tested us, and we had emerged stronger, wiser, and more united than ever. And that, my dear friends, is the true story behind the nights of laughter, the shadows in the living room, and the hidden corners of a home that, like life itself, is full of surprises waiting to teach us, challenge us, and ultimately, transform us. As I sit here now, reflecting on everything that has happened, I am filled with a profound sense of gratitude. Life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. The laughter that once terrified me, the shadows that haunted my nights, the secrets that seemed impossible to unravel, they were all part of a journey that taught me more about love, trust, and courage than I ever could have imagined. I think about the night I first heard it, the laugh that echoed through the living room, a sound both haunting and mysterious. At the time, I thought it meant danger, betrayal, or some hidden malice. But now I understand that life has its own way of testing us, of forcing us to confront fear, doubt, and the unknown so that we can grow stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. Robert and I have rebuilt our lives together, not just as a married couple, but as partners in understanding, guardians of trust, and witnesses to the transformative power of love. 50 years of marriage had taught us patience and resilience, but nothing prepared us for the quiet lessons hidden in a child's laughter and a secret kept for love's sake. Now, our hearts are fuller, our bond deeper, and our capacity for empathy greater than ever before. Emily, the little girl who unknowingly became our teacher, has flourished in our care. She reminds us daily that innocence, curiosity, and resilience are powerful forces. She reminds us that laughter, even when unexpected or initially frightening, can be a sign of life, hope, and joy. Watching her grow, learning from her courage to trust and her willingness to adapt, has reshaped the way I approach the world. I have learned that family isn't just what you are born into, it's what you nurture, protect, and embrace, even in unexpected ways. Looking back, I realize that the fear I felt was necessary. Fear sharpened my senses, taught me vigilance, and pushed me to seek the truth rather than ignore it. But it was empathy, patience, and open-heartedness that ultimately guided me through the shadows. Fear alone would have trapped me in suspicion. Love alone, without courage, would have left me vulnerable. Together, they became a compass, guiding me to understanding, forgiveness, and ultimately, joy. I want to share a truth I've learned, one I hope resonates with anyone listening to this story. Life will often surprise you in ways you cannot predict. People may keep secrets, situations may seem inexplicable, and fear may cloud your judgment. But if you approach life with courage, patience, and an open heart, even the most confusing or unsettling experiences can become opportunities for growth and connection. There is power in observation, in listening, in watching closely without immediately assuming the worst. I realized that my instincts had been correct. I had sensed that something was off, but my interpretation had been limited by fear and imagination. When I combined intuition with empathy, curiosity with patience, I found the truth. And in that truth, I found not betrayal, but love. Not danger, but hope. Not separation, but unity. I have also learned that love, trust, and kindness are not finite. They do not diminish when shared with others, they grow. Emily became a part of our family not because she was forced into it, but because we allowed space for trust, care, and compassion. Our children accepted her, our home welcomed her, and together we all discovered the joy of opening our hearts beyond what we had thought possible. Even in the quiet moments, when the house is still, when the shadows stretch across the walls, when the world outside feels uncertain, I feel a sense of peace. I know that challenges will come, secrets may surface, and life will continue to test patience and resilience. But I also know that fear is not the enemy, understanding is the guide, and love is the ultimate reward. As I reflect on this journey, I think about what I would say to my younger self, to anyone facing uncertainty, or to anyone who has been afraid of the unknown. Do not run from the shadows. Do not assume the worst. Listen carefully, observe patiently, and approach every mystery with an open heart. The answers, though sometimes hidden, will reveal themselves. And when they do, you may find not what you feared, but what you needed all along: love, connection, and understanding. Robert and I still sit together each evening, holding hands, listening to the quiet rhythm of our home. Emily's laughter has become part of that rhythm, a reminder that joy can emerge from the most unlikely places, and that family, trust, and love are built not only on what is seen, but on what is nurtured quietly, patiently, and courageously. I have shared this story not because I wish to frighten, but because I hope it inspires. I hope it reminds anyone listening that life's challenges, no matter how frightening or mysterious, carry lessons that shape us into stronger, wiser, and more compassionate human beings. I hope it encourages patience in the face of uncertainty, empathy in the presence of fear, and courage when the unknown looms large. And so, I end this story with a simple truth: the nights of mystery, the hidden corners, the laughter that once frightened me, they were not threats. They were lessons. They were opportunities to grow, to connect, to heal, and to love more fully than I had ever imagined. Life will always test us, but it is in those tests that we discover the extraordinary depth of human resilience and the transformative power of trust, patience, and unconditional love. As I sit by the window tonight, the house quiet and warm, I am filled with gratitude. For the lessons, for the surprises, for the laughter, for the love. And I know, without a shadow of a doubt, that life, in all its unexpected twists, is beautiful when met with an open heart.